Hello, everyone. Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. We have a very interesting and excellent show ahead for you today. Now, as we roll forward into this thing called government disclosure, which seems to be trickling by the wayside by the day. I don't know why this is, but it is. We're going to do a deep dive into UFOs today, a very deep dive, and put the question forward with Dr. Jonathan Kendall today. Are UFOs exactly what we're looking at? And are they what they say they are? You know, very interestingly, our vice president and a few others have been kind of chided for questioning whether these things are exactly extraterrestrials. And my guest and I today are going to take a trip down that road and question whether they are extraterrestrial. The subject of Dr. Jonathan Kendall's book, The Metaphysics of UFOs, does a wonderful job of circling around this topic and taking a complete look of not just UFOs, but men in black and other subjects regarding UFOs. Let me tell you a little bit about them, and we'll bring them in. Dr. Jonathan Kendall is a board-certified medical doctor in internal medicine and nephrology. As a physician, he is in a relatively unique position to evaluate potential medical and psychological explanations for paranormal encounters. He is well-versed in ufology literature, physical research, quantum mechanics, and theoretical physics, the worlds of paranormal activity, metaphysics, religious studies, and science has always fascinated him. It's fascinated me as well. We'll get together here and we'll talk about his book here, The Metaphysics of UFOs, Evidential Case Studies on UAPs, Paranormal Phenomena, and Spiritual Experiences. Welcome in for the first time, Dr. Jonathan Kendall. Dr. Kendall, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Tim. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine. First of all, I do have to tip my cap to you for doing probably one of the most complete books I think I've seen in quite some time on the subject of this. And I want to thank you so much for taking a complete deep dive on this topic. I think a lot of times when authors sit down to look at this, they want to take such a deep scientific look at this subject, and they don't want to look into some of the other nuances of UFOs. What made you want to take a complete dive into UFOs with this book?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for the compliment, Tim. That's really what I was going for. I think it's really just the ambiguity of it. You know, the nuts and bolts extraterrestrial hypothesis folks tend to focus on all the physical aspects of UFOs, and there are very physical aspects of the UFO phenomenon that's, I think, established very well in the literature. And then there's these other high strangeness effects, the spiritual aspects of it. And that's those aspects of it that other people not necessarily going with more of a spiritual or occult or an extra dimensional hypothesis go with. So I was literally pulled back and forth as I studied the different data points. There were times where I kind of leaned extraterrestrial hypothesis. There were times I leaned more extra dimensional / spiritual. And it was really difficult to figure out. And it's, even though I come down on a side, my views are very provisional. And I think I think both sides have a good argument to make here. And so I felt like it deserved as comprehensive a look as I could give it.
And it is a very comprehensive look at that. Well, you know, it's interesting too that you don't necessarily start off the book by attacking scientifically. You give us a good overall history of where things come down as far as UFOs go, and then we jump in to some of the things that we could pick apart here. But you also bring up some very interesting points that I kind of want to get to as well, where it comes to this book, and metaphysically, what fascinates me about where you come from when I hear doctor, I think automatically I'm getting a very scientific breakdown of this book. And forgive me for kind of stammering here, Doc.
That's okay.
Because the minute I get this book and I get my hands on this book, I automatically think, okay, I'm going to get the scientific reason why these are physical creatures traversing through from a different planet across the universe and propulsion systems and the physics behind it and why they could make it from across the galaxy in such and such a time and why they're probably sitting behind our world somewhere or behind a moon somewhere and coming back and forth. I didn't get that with this book. We do talk about why they could be, why they could be coming from a different dimensional plane, why they could be, sitting maybe under the sea, why they could be coming from different places. I want to talk about that first. Let's talk about that first, about why they potentially could be from different places. I want to talk about that first. What would make you want to go down that road and say, as a doctor, as a medical doctor, well, let's tackle this first. What would make you want to go down the different theories of, okay, they could be coming from a different dimension. They could be a different type of creature altogether.
Yeah. So I thought that each of the major theories deserved a hearing. Essentially, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the spiritual / occult hypothesis, and the extra dimensional hypothesis. That is, that the extraterrestrial meaning that they're coming from somewhere else, perhaps in our galaxy or even outside of our galaxy, and they've been able to basically tackle astronomical travel and get here that way. If they're extra dimensional, that means that they come from some parallel universe or reality. And if they're spiritual or occult, in a way, that's kind of a subset of that extra dimensional theory, you could argue, because if there is a spiritual world, it's probably not out there somewhere where you can travel to it in a spaceship. It's probably somewhere parallel to us. So maybe that's a type of the extra dimensional hypothesis. And I felt like those are the three biggest theories. They're certainly not the only ones. I don't talk any about the possibility that they're time travelers, future humans coming to visit us. I don't talk much about it being military technology, although I talk a little bit about that towards the end, or that it's a breakaway society. Maybe these things are just from a different civilization that's broken off from us a long time ago. Perhaps they have their base somewhere in the sea. Maybe because we haven't explored much of the ocean. 70% of the globe is covered in water, right? So we just haven't explored a whole lot of that. So I explore those a little bit, but I think those first three that I talk about, those for me are the most likely. And I will say the first chapter, just a little bit of that. The reason I go into the history a little bit and I get into the Twining memo, the estimate of the situation, the Robertson panel, is I want, and then bring it ultimately into today, is because studying this topic is a very stigmatizing topic. Maybe not so much now as it was 10 to 20 to 30 years ago. But why is it stigmatizing? Well, I talk about that in the opening. Well, why should we even take this seriously, that there's some kind of intelligently controlled craft in our skies? I feel like it's important to establish that at the outset so you can go through the rest of the book and say, okay, maybe there's something to this. What kind of evidence does he bring?
There's also something else you bring in too. Automatically, we start right away with Mothman,
right?
Which doesn't, to me, seem like. I mean, most people want to take Mothman and throw it in the cryptid category.
Yes.
And not necessarily in the UFO category. And you also, throughout the book, you cite John Keel quite a bit. Can I ask why? Why are we bringing John Keel into the conversation, especially through a lot of the book? And why are we starting with Mothman? What's the hypothesis behind that?
Two main reasons. One, it's a hometown bias. Okay. I grew up in Cross Lanes, West Virginia, which is about 40 miles away from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the Mothman haunted that general area back in 1966, 1967. And so I grew up hearing stories about it. So when I got into John Keel's books and some of the other literature on the Mothman, I felt like that was a good place to start. And I discovered that there was a litany of UFOs associated with that. There were probably more UFO sightings in that area, Point Pleasant, Gallipolis, and the surrounding counties than there were sightings of the Mothman. There were these mysterious visitors, these men in black, which came and intimidated some of the townsfolk. Yeah, and some of the journalists, Mary Hyre, for instance. And it's what was interesting is in Point Pleasant and in other flap areas, northeastern Utah. I get into that a little bit later on in the book. It's interesting that cryptids, UFOs, ghosts, and so forth, they seem to keep each other's company. And that's why that's another reason I thought that first chapter on the Mothman and its associated phenomena would set the stage.
Interesting. Okay. You mentioned Men in Black. Let's get into that before we get to our break here today.
Okay.
You go extensively into Men in Black, and I'm glad you do, because it seems like a topic that gets forgotten when we talk ufology. And we tend to forget about the nuance of Men in Black. And I want to chalk it up to this talk, and I want you to tell me if I'm on the right path here or not.
Okay.
I tend to think it's because it's been glossed over by Hollywood. It's been sweetened a little bit by Hollywood. I think since the Men in Black movies have come out, I think people think, oh, it's just the cute and cuddly Men in Black. We've humanized the Men in Black. I think we've forgotten about how much damage has been done by the Men in Black. Does that seem about right?
I think so. And even though those movies have been well known for decades, I never knew that was actually part of the UFO lore until I started studying these things. Mm-hmm. And actually, the Men in Black got me into this. I was writing a book on apparitions, and then I read a piece by Hilary Evans, who studied the paranormal. And he talked about Men in Black, and I'm thinking, wow, are these apparitions? So I got into a tangent, and then I got into the Mothman and UFOs, and suddenly I'd been studying it mostly for 2 years, and I'd kind of neglected the apparitions book, interestingly enough. It just grabbed my attention. So, yeah, these MIBs, so they would show up and intimidate UFO witnesses. Some UFO witnesses who supposedly would recover materials from a landing or maybe get a picture of a UFO, they would come and retrieve the materials. I think the lore actually goes back to Albert Bender back in the early 1950s. He had some visitors from Men in Black. Basically, they are what they say, the black suits, black hats, and so forth. These were probably real flesh and blood Men in Black that visited him. A lot of the big UFO cases, some of the famous ones best evidenced, Rendlesham Forest, for instance, that happened, I believe it was 1980, if I'm not mistaken, in Suffolk, England. Mm-hmm. That even the Tic Tac UAP, which is one of the more evidential modern cases in 2004 off the coast of San Diego. Another one of my favorite cases, the Big Sur case, where Bob Jacobs he had this sighting on video where he would see a UFO shoot down a dummy nuclear warhead. They were always, in Roswell, and you could go on down the line, they were always intimidated by their superiors not to say anything, or these men would show up and retrieve the footage. And it seemed that the government took a deep interest in this for a long time. So I think the Men in Black are in some cases real flesh and blood human beings. But then you got cases where Men in Black come and intimidate witnesses before they've even had a chance to tell anybody. They may not even have had a chance to rake it home, and they might run across one of these characters. They might be really strange in the way they act, like they'd be served a steak in a restaurant and wouldn't know how to cut it. They'd be served Jell-O and actually try to drink it rather than eat it with a spoon. Sometimes they would show up in these very expensive antique cars that would appear brand new. Even with the resources of the federal government, you wonder how in the world would they be able to retrieve such a thing, like, say, a Cadillac that had the new car smell. Yeah. So some of these would seem to be more apparitional in nature.
Would it be safe to say that, okay, so there's got to be human MIB, and then there's these not so human MIB that show up. Could it be that there's a game being played between aliens and humans to one up each other within the human alien race? Is there something going on maybe with whatever is supposed to be MIB? Do you think MIB is part of a shadow government?
Yeah, I think if you get now we're getting into kind of areas of more modern times with disclosure and deep state and that kind of admittedly kind of conspiratorial thinking. Yes, I know there have been FOIAs done, Freedom of Information Act requests that have shown that the government has been interested in the UFO phenomenon, even though they don't publicly say this, ever since Project Blue Book ended. This goes way back. Yeah, and so I definitely think that there are elements within the government that is behind this, as well as a paranormal aspect that seems to, whatever this phenomenon is, it seems to want to mimic that.
Okay. So it would, I guess, confuse me a little bit as to why an alien would disguise itself as an MIB. Is it because they want inside information as to what these guys are wanting to know about them?
Well, if you want to go down that road, that would be the extraterrestrial hypothesis, presumably. If an alien would dress up as a Men in Black or an MIB, and I guess that would be as evidenced by their very strange behavior, they would have some kind of advanced, maybe psychic powers to know who saw them flying up in the sky, and they came and intimidated witnesses. That's how I suppose you could argue it. I think the MIB phenomenon, however, is evidence against an extraterrestrial hypothesis. That's why I think that there's something more paranormal about it going on. That's you could argue that it's both.
Okay.
Setting parsimony aside, but I would argue that that's a factor that would favor more of the occult hypothesis. It's hard for me to accept that extraterrestrials coming from across the galaxy would dress up like humans in suits and kind of go through all this theater.
Okay.
Just to intimidate witnesses. So I would use that as an argument in favor of a more extra dimensional / occult hypothesis.
Okay. I find that fascinating that one is taking over another to get to somebody for some reason, right? I mean, it's creepy. I mean, it's creepy as all get out, right? To have that happen.
When you say taking over, do you mean like possession of an actual human?
Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe they,
perhaps. I often thought about them just as sheer ghosts, but you might be onto something because they don't act like that. Because apparitions, some of them are very impressive in the literature in terms of the physical effects that they leave. But these MIBs, they seem to be seen by everybody that happens to be present. Apparitions often aren't. And they seem to leave physical effects like eating food. They are able to carry off trinkets, things like that. So maybe kind of a temporary spirit possession is a better understanding of this phenomenon.
Yeah. It's a bizarre one at that. I mean,
yes.
It's one of those chapters again that you have to read the book in order to really get a good affinity for it and get an idea of what it is that these you do have the human side of it. You do have the human Men in Black that come along. They make their threats. They move along. They're in and out, just in and out like a robbery, right? They do their thing, they leave, and you really wonder who it is you've been talking to. And then you've got these strange ones that show up in restaurants and just give me food, and they're like, okay.
And I do think there's a paranormal aspect to it, but there are a couple of MIB cases of these people showing up, acting strangely, and oftentimes their license plates are not actual license plates when they're looked up. But there was another more recent case where the license plate was obtained, and it was actually traced to a carpool in Homeland Security. So it would seem that there really are some flesh and blood human beings out there acting very strangely too. And there's another one, Richard French. I think Keel talks about him. Mm-hmm. Well, he did some MIB activity, and someone got his license plate, and actually they're in Minnesota. And they were able to trace it to a rental car there in Minnesota. So you have to assume that this was probably a real human being as well. So maybe there are no apparitions. Maybe some of these cases where they disappeared, maybe that's exaggeration, fraud, and maybe they are all flesh and blood people after all. I tend to think that there's probably a authentic paranormal dimension to at least some of these cases, though.
It's crazy. That's for sure.
It is crazy.
Very crazy. I tell you what, we'll take our break here. When we come back, I want to talk. I want to get into some of the other things here in the book that intrigue me. I do want to get into the idea of where these things are coming from. We'll talk about extra dimensional versus whether they're actually physical beings. I do want to talk about crash retrievals, why we're actually coming up with physical ships when if they are extra dimensional, why do we have a physical ship? I do want to talk disclosure with you a little bit too, Doc, and about some of the things we're getting from the government and what your opinion is about that, about what we're getting from the government and what it is we're getting from them and what your opinion is about that as well.
Sounds good.
And we'll talk much, much more. The book is a fascinating one, folks. And again, I encourage you to get it during the break. Boy, we've got there's a lot here to cover today, and we're not going to get to it all, of course. And Dr. Kendall is holding it up there. It's called the Metaphysics of UFOs, Evidential Case Studies on UAPs, Paranormal Phenomena, and Spiritual Experiences. Dr. Jonathan Kendall is my guest. And when we come back, we'll talk much, much more. We got a whole lot to cover here and not a lot of time to do it, but we'll get to as much as we can today. There's even a very interesting theory that I want to get to at the end of the program here, without spoiler free, of course, but we're gonna do a deep dive here as far as things that Dr. Kendall's been talking about in the book that are absolutely fascinating. That and I do have one question when we come back from break that may align Dr. Kendall with some popular politicians. So we'll get to that as well. I want to talk to you first about our sponsor here, Jelly Bean and Julia's over in Coon Rapids. Let me tell you about their specials this week and what they've got remaining for the rest of the week. Coming up today, happy hour, 25% off all appetizers. That excludes their appetizer sampler, half price off all single pour well drinks, half price off all Mick Golden Light and Coors Light taps, and of course half price off all domestic cans and bottles. That's tonight over at Jelly Bean and Julia's. Tomorrow, the smoked prime rib dinner. This dinner is amazing, folks. You're hearing me rant about it every week here on the program. And of course, you know I'm over there every Friday for the smoked prime rib dinner. The 12 and 16 ounce cuts are amazing. They are smoked overnight in that walk-in smoker over there at Jelly Bean and Julia's. And they even smoked the au jus, which is, it tastes so good. They have a creamy horseradish that comes with it. You've got the tequila berry salad that comes with it, that sweet and tangy dressing with the bacon bits. It's absolutely a classic salad. You have the Boston baked potato that is deep fried in that avocado oil. It's a healthy oil for you. It comes loaded if you'd like it. So you get it with the sour cream, the butter. I'm saying everything in front of the doctor that he probably doesn't want to hear. Being an internal medicine doctor in phrenology is probably not good for the kidneys, but you know what? It tastes really good. I know that much. It's probably one of the top 5 meals you'll ever have. And of course, you get it with Texas toast as well. All of that for one of the best prices you'll ever get, a prime rib dinner. I'll guarantee you that as well. They start serving at 4:30 over there at Jelly Bean and Julia's, and they serve until it's gone. So you're going to want to get there early. Make sure you get there early for that dinner. And of course, breakfast is always on Sundays over there at Jelly Bean and Julia's. Make sure you get over there. They've got the brisket with the hash and chicken and waffles, much, much more. It's all at Jelly Bean and Julia's over there in Coon Rapids on Coon Rapids Boulevard. Jelly Bean and Julia's at jellybeanandjulias.com. Check it out. The link is in the description of the program. Jelly Bean and Julia's, our sponsor today. Make sure you head over there, because when you head over there, by gosh, you are family. All right. When we come back, more with Dr. Jonathan Kendall. We're talking the metaphysics of UFOs right here on the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. My guest is Dr. Jonathan Kendall. Name of the book is The Metaphysics of UFOs, Evidential Case Studies on UAPs, Paranormal Phenomena, and Spiritual Experiences. We have a link in the description of this program, so you can go get that book. And by all means, please go get that book because it is a good one. Okay, Doctor, I had told you before the break I was going to align you with some company in our government that says we don't think that these things are necessarily what they think they are. As a matter of fact, there's one representative that had said if you'd seen the things that I'd seen, you wouldn't sleep at night. Some of the things.
Tim Burchett.
Yep. Yes. Tim Burchett. That's right. He told that to TMZ shortly before disclosure. I'm wondering what it is he's seeing in these skiffs that he says that you wouldn't sleep at night. Because the things that have rolled out so far in disclosure, it's not exactly things that I wouldn't sleep at night over. Although the one video from the moon, or the one picture from the moon where they're standing on the moon and you see the lights in the background, that's a little creepy. I'll give it that. But our Vice President J.D. Vance says, hold on a minute. I tend to think that these things aren't really alien, that they may be demons. And when he said that, boy, did he get backlash. But I tend to think, and I'm of a mind, and I tend to keep an open mind. We've had a guest on this program, demonologist Nathaniel Gillis, who says, you know what? He himself has been, or has had an attachment that disguised itself as an alien. So he's of a mind that, yeah, there are things out there that can look like an alien and be a demon. And then I open your book, The Metaphysics of UFOs, and that possibility is there. I want to again throw this grenade back in your lap. Are you of that mind as well, that these things are not exactly what we're seeing?
I am, in the sense that I don't think that I lean against the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And when you get into the abductions, especially, that seems to be, to me, that makes a lot more sense as an extra dimensional or occult or spiritual phenomena. Whenever I first studied some of these cases, particularly one that happened back in 1976 in my own backyard, the Casey County, Kentucky case, that was an absolutely hellish abduction phenomenon that occurred to 3 Christian ladies, pillars of their community. Probably to date the most disturbing abduction case I've read, arguably one of the most evidential as well. I would have had no problem at one point, or maybe even now with that case, arguing that's a demonic phenomenon. Then you got Brazil, South America. Some of those cases seem to be particularly malevolent, especially the island of Kularish. There were these UAPs that would shoot these lasers that the population called vampire lights, where it would hit them. They couldn't hide. It would go right through the walls of their house, the roofs of their house, hit them. They'd lose blood. They'd be found to be anemic on blood work. It pretty much drove the whole island, all the population back in 1977 off the island. Kathleen Marden, she discusses cases where people have tried, one in particular tried to summon UFOs. I think that would be your Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And according to what she wrote in her book, Extraterrestrial Contact, that's probably not a good idea. She says that there are several cases where people have tried to do that and they've had these malignant attachments. Ann Druffel, she wrote a really thought-provoking book once called How to Protect Yourself from Alien Abductions, where she says that invoking the names of religious icons, Jesus, the Blessed Virgin Mary, would often work to compel these things away. Well, if they're flesh and blood extraterrestrials, that in theory shouldn't work, right? And she also mentioned other techniques. It wasn't just religious icon invocation. Yeah, so there does seem to be a component to this that is malevolent. Those cases that I mentioned briefly, I wouldn't have any issues necessarily thinking these are demonic. However, there are also a number of cases where people are healed by these things, and apparently deliberately. Preston Dennett has a really good book where he talks about 300 UFO cases where there's healing, sometimes within the context of an abduction. And then this was the biggest surprise, I think, of this whole research for me, Tim. When people are abducted, they go through these very traumatic experiences. And most people, I think, treat that as a negative experience initially. Oddly enough, there is some data, some evidence that a good number, even the majority of these people, not only are they glad that they had these experiences eventually, but they claim that there's all these psychic after effects. Not all of them are negative, such as precognitive glimpses, that's brief glimpses into the future. They claim the ability to heal and so forth, and they almost have what seems to be transformative experiences. They're more spiritual afterwards. They have less fear of death, more altruistic, give up destructive behaviors, and that ilk. So I think it would be an oversimplification to reduce them all to demons, but I think it would be fair to say that maybe an aspect of this phenomenon clearly does seem to be malevolent at the same time.
I wouldn't disagree with you. The one that Nathaniel dealt with, he's dealing with some sort of super genome, if that's a way to put it. The way that he put it was it rejects all religious symbols and iconography. He said that you can put any type of iconography in front of it, a cross, whatever you want to put in front of it. You can invoke whatever prayers you want in front of it. It'll basically laugh at you. The only thing that puts it down is iron. I don't know.
What?
Is iron, using any type of iron. So
iron.
You actually have to press iron up against it in order to repel it. I don't know why that is, but he said he's used everything from Judaism to Christianity to every type of religion against it, and it doesn't repel it. But it comes in the guise of an alien. But it's when you use iron. That's what.
Is it a gray alien?
It takes the shape of different types of aliens. So yes, it'll come in a gray or a reptilian. But it'll come in the shape of different, whatever you want, whatever you fear the most. That's what it'll come as.
Well, that's very disturbing. But, iron, though, that actually makes the literature. I believe even Keel mentions that, how iron has been used to repel these things. And if I'm not mistaken, Skinwalker Ranch, in northeastern Utah, if I'm not mistaken, when Terry Sherman, back in the 90s, I believe it was, first purchased that ranch, when he showed up, I believe that there are iron bars across the door. I think it was iron that was the element. So that's interesting. There does seem to be some aspect of that in the literature. I don't know what is sacred about iron, or if that's even the right way to look at it.
Yeah. It's again, it's confusing, but that there has to be laws somewhere with everything is interesting to me. It really is. Even if it's not, and I think you brought it up in the book too. The fact that it may not necessarily be the icon itself. So it's not that I'm calling out to Christ. It's not that I'm calling out to Buddha. It's not that I'm calling out to whatever icon it is. I think it's like you said in the book, it's the power of the intent, right? It's that I'm asserting my will and my will for something higher than me, to repel whatever this is that's in front of me, whether it be demon or otherwise, or something that may be larger than me in the universe, right? To get rid of, demon, spirit, whatever it is, to get rid of it. And that in itself is a pretty strong statement. Because to me, if this were a terrestrial or a physical object, you would think a physical object would just kind of look at you and go, well, what is it that you're doing right now? I don't understand what you're trying to do here, right? We should be able to communicate and have a conversation, right? Well, I worship a God too, right? I mean, that would be the next line that would come out of a terrestrial object or a terrestrial person. I mean, it'd be like if you looked at me and you didn't like what I was saying to you and you'd go, well, go away in the name of Jesus. And I'd look at you and go, well, why would you say that to me? I mean, aren't we talking?
Right. Well, if it's flesh and blood intruders coming into your house, they're not going to.
Right.
Invoking religious iconography is not going to work.
Right.
It would be the same thing with flesh and blood aliens.
Yeah.
Which is again, I think an argument more in favor of some kind of other phenomenon, something that invokes the spiritual world.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, I find that that whole thing not confusing, but I find it intriguing. That's
yes.
For sure. That's for sure. You have a whole chapter on hypnotic regression. I want to get into that for a second here because I've as a healthy skeptic, I wonder how reliable at times hypnotic regression could be. Tell me your pros and cons about hypnotic regression.
So I start out in chapter 4 with a case from psychical research, well before there was ever an abduction, at least as far as we know. It goes back to the 19th century where there was a man named Ansel Bourne. He goes into what we call a dissociative fugue, where he became a different person, moved to a different city, took on a different occupation, lived somewhere else. That went on for some time. He eventually just woke up and he remembered who he was. Hey, I'm Ansel Bourne. Where in the world am I? Couldn't remember anything that had happened ever since he took on this alternative identity. So later on, he was hypnotized by one of the members of the Society for Psychical Research, came up with this narrative. They fact-checked the narrative, and some of what he remembered through hypnotic regression turned out to be true, even down to matters of detail. On the other hand, there were some discrepancies as well. So what that tells me, and there's some other evidence out there that supports this as well, I do think that hypnotic regression can retrieve actual memories. But I think that there are going to be some blank spots that is going to be filled in by the imagination. That's going to be fantasy. So that's what we call confabulation. And some of these hypnotic regressions that were done, especially by some of the UFO investigators, the abduction investigators, the Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs of the world, people are going to bring their expectations to those. I think the investigators themselves are going to influence. Obviously, if you're going to a well-known abduction investigator after you had a period of missing time, you're probably thinking that alien abduction is a possibility, and therefore the narrative is already contaminated. So I take with a pretty high degree of skepticism the actual narrative that is uncovered during hypnotic regressions as far as what's uncovered about the alleged abduction itself.
Okay.
Because it's probably at best a mixture of fact and fantasy.
So there's a good chance you just so happen to be missing some time. You go to an investigator and you don't think you remember anything. You're going to come out of there remembering something that looks like it's straight out of a movie.
Yes. Yeah, one of my favorite couple of examples from Jacobson, he cites a lady, I believe her name was Lily Martinson, who thought she had a guardian angel, some kind of protective guardian. I think it was in his book, The Threat. Well, for whatever reason, she thought she was having some kind of abduction phenomenon. So she goes to him, gets hypnotized, and voila, that protective guardian, she has what Jacob says, a less romantic view of it. There was another case where this lady woke up. Actually, this one might have been the Lily Martinson case, this second one. She was in the Virgin Islands, woke up, saw a deceased loved one standing at the foot of the bed, giving her a message of reassurance. That's actually very common. It's actually a lot more common than what people suppose. Those kinds of what I call reunion apparitions. Well, again, she thought she was having some kind of abduction phenomenon, went to Jacobs, and not surprisingly, under hypnotic regression, that deceased loved one became a gray alien while under hypnotic regression. So I suspect that was confabulation. She started being suspicious of what was initially a positive experience, and it was turned into something negative through hypnotic regression.
How then, Doctor, do you surmise that we know a real alien abduction from something we might think we actually experienced under a regression? If you wake up, because we do have the hypnagogic and hypnopompic states that we discover when we are coming out of sleep, and those aren't necessarily reliable either. So how do we know that we've really had an abduction experience then?
Right, and then sleep paralysis would be another one where you literally are in a state of being awake and asleep at the same time, and with as alien abduction became part of the popular culture. Some of these demons that attack you in the night, the terrors that come in the night, to use David Hufford's language, would be the gray aliens. And so then you go to an investigator, and again, you get an abduction phenomena while under hypnosis, probably confabulation. So part of it is most people that have had missing time, they'll either have fragmented memories of what happened, or the memories will come flooding back later on, sometimes weeks, sometimes even years later. That's not necessarily reliable either, because memory is reconstructive. It's not like a recording, but it is somewhat reliable. Memory is not totally unreliable. Okay. Then there's usually what happens, like let's take Betty and Barney Hill as a case study. Usually when people see the UFO, when you have missing time, you don't necessarily see a UFO, but classically you do. They saw a UFO together, two of them. So I don't think they were hallucinating. Barney got out, got his binoculars, got close to it, saw occupants scurrying about inside, got back in the car. So he remembered that, and as did Betty Hill, with their continuous memory. So that wasn't part of what was obtained through hypnotic regression. And then they got home 2 hours late. So something has to account for that missing time. Even if we don't believe what Benjamin Simon pulled out of them during hypnotic regression, something has to account for those 2 hours of missing time. And then they had all these other strange things. Their watches had stopped. The car had all these polished spots on them. When they would hold a compass up to it, the dial would just spin around and around. So just some kind of really odd electromagnetic disturbance. And then in the aftermath, there were, again, all these psychic after effects, all these strange phenomena that would occur, like MIB accounts, hypnotic effects, psychokinesis, that is matter apparently moving, kind of poltergeist-like effects around the house. And some of these were seen by family members, including the aforementioned Kathleen Martin, who was Betty Hill's niece. She talks a good deal about this in Captured. And so many of these cases have other such evidence for them that kind of thing that I think it's really hard to dismiss the fact that something anomalous occurred. And it's important to point out that while a lot of people in modern times might be asleep and experience sleep paralysis, hypnagogic, hypnopompic hallucinations, a lot of people back in the 60s and 70s would be in the car. 10 to 20% of the cases would have 2, 3, or more people involved. That pretty much rules out hallucination, dissociative fugue, sleep paralysis, and so forth.
Interesting. All right. I want to get your opinion as well. You know, we've dealt in the past with support groups like Opus, and I want to get your opinion on support groups that are doing that work as well. Do you feel like they're doing good work, God's work out there that are helping people that are having these experiences, or do you feel like they're leading people astray?
These support groups, are they facilitating belief in these alternative, in these anomalous phenomena like abduction?
I think they're honestly, and I'm being honest with you here, Dr. Kendall. I honestly think that they're there just to help people who believe they've had an experience.
Okay.
They're there just to help people get through the experience and to help them talk through the experience that they've had and to help them deal with the psychological effect of having been abducted.
Yeah, I'd have to know more about these groups, I think. I haven't really studied Opus, so I'm a little bit at a disadvantage here. I do know Kevin Randall, Cohn, and Estes. They wrote probably the best skeptical book on the abduction phenomena. I think it was a 1997 book called The Abduction Enigma. 400-page book, really good stuff. And they talk about these support groups. Their belief was that they probably did more harm than good, not only when it comes to alien abduction, but the so-called satanic ritual abuse scandal, the satanic panic that occurred back in the 1980s. They talked a lot of these people into thinking they had these anomalous experiences when they actually didn't. So someone claiming to be abducted, I think, goes to a support group. They should be examined by at least one psychiatrist. All prosaic explanations should be ruled out first.
Well, I know that
then maybe consider an abduction after that.
I know that Opus only works with licensed psychologists. So,
okay,
yeah. So it's all on the up and up. There's no, I mean, it's not just experiencers talking to experiencers. It's you're seen by someone who's licensed. So
okay,
yeah. So it's totally a clinical setting. So
right. Well, I like to think we've learned from the experience in the 1980s, because a lot of people got falsely accused of sexual abuse. It was all through hypnotic regression, and a lot of people had these lurid memories of satanic ritual abuse that was so complicated that it even got FBI and police involved, and they never found evidence of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of false memory syndrome. It kind of gets us back to what we talked about, hypnotic regression, how you have to be careful about the information obtained.
Right. I want to get to as we're getting to the back half of the program here. I want to get to the occult aspects of UFOs, and I want to dig a little deeper into that. As we've been kind of talking a little bit about it as we've gone through the program, but I want to dig a little deeper into it. There's a point in the book where you allude to the fact that it's not all what we see, and you draw a line, and it's a very deliberate line. And it's kind of refreshing. You draw that line between aliens and the jinn. Can you explain to us how that line gets drawn?
Yeah, so that I'm making kind of a backdoor, maybe not so subtle one, argument in favor of some kind of occult hypothesis, like you said. The idea is these, especially when you get into abductions or other kinds of close encounters of modern times, this, as Thomas Bullard, the folklorist from Indiana University, calls it, the supernatural kidnap narrative. Well, jinn of the Middle East, going all the way back centuries, even back to pre-Islamic times. And then in Celtic countries, the fairies, you have quite different yet similar experiences, and people being taken to these other realms. Instead of a spaceship, they'll be taken to maybe some subterranean level that's lit up, but it's the source of the light is uncertain, and they're returned, and there's episodes of where there's time dilation effects, so only so much time will have occurred when they're in fairyland, and then they'll come back, and years have supposedly passed when they get back into the real world, so to speak. So what I draw is a list of, I think, very interesting comparisons between the jinn and of other cultures, and then alien abductions here in the West. And I think it's one, the argument would be, and I'm certainly not the one that I'm not the person that's drawn this out. John Mack and Jacques Vallée found this a long time before I have, that there are similarities that may be, as we've reached a more technological age, that the alien abduction narrative is just a more updated, technologized version of fairy and jinn kidnappings and so forth.
It's an interesting theory. And again, folks, I encourage you to pick up the book and take a look at it. The Metaphysics of UFOs, Evidential Case Studies on UAPs, Paranormal Phenomena, and Spiritual Experiences. When I read that, I went, oh, that's an interesting way to draw that line between the two of them. And I know, like you said, it's not the first time it's been brought up, but every time I hear it, it turns a little bit of a light on for me, at least for a section of what may be going on. It may not be all of it, but a section. You know, they say it's a wide, vast universe, and there's supposed to be many different species of these supposed aliens that are out there. But at least for some of these, it seems like it fits. With that, I'll bring this up as we're starting to draw to a close here, Dr. Kendall. We're getting dribs and drabs of government disclosure. We've had 4 releases now from the government, and it seems like it's being put out there at a slow pace for one reason or another. You can either blame it on the fact that they're afraid of either shocking us as a country, or they just are trying to put it at an even pace for one reason or another. Maybe they have an agenda, who knows? I'm curious, as someone who's written this book and taken as deep of a dive into this as you have, how you look at disclosure and government disclosure. And when you get a good look at these different releases, what you think or what you see when you go through these files.
Sure. I think, and I've done a lot of thinking on this even since this book was essentially in the finishing stages. And so my thoughts may have even evolved since then, although I think it still reflects what I wrote. I think so much of this phenomenon seems to be a trickster phenomenon, the trickster archetype. You know, it seems, we talked about the demonic component to it, quote unquote, and the angelic component, the malevolent and the benevolent components. But there's another component that just seems to want to mess with us. So much of this just seems to be staged. And I wonder if I had to have a guess, and I hope I'm wrong on this. Mm-hmm. There's a part of me that hopes I'm wrong, even though there's another part of me that keeps wanting to chase the mystery. I feel like we're heading for a big letdown. Okay. The whistleblowers that are out there, I don't have any tangible reason to doubt them, the David Grushes of the world and some of the others, but there's a skeptical part of me that wonders if they're all on the level, if we're going towards some big bubble that's just going to be burst ultimately. I'd love to know what Tim Burchett knows. He talks about not being able to sleep at night. I'd love to know what happened in those skiffs and what he was told. Anna Paulina Luna, the Florida congresswoman, said, read the Book of Enoch, which talks about watchers. That would suggest to me that she's hinting at more of an extra dimensional or occult phenomenon.
Yeah.
But this trickster aspect of it makes me think we're probably not going to see disclosure anytime soon. We may be chasing, and this isn't going to be popular, but I'll say it anyway. I kind of tend to think we might be chasing this phenomenon forever.
Really?
Yes. I don't know. Whatever this is, it seems to want to mess with us. It seems to want to give us enough evidence to know it exists, but nothing that's going to be definitive enough to basically assuage all the skeptical doubters out there. And I wonder too if that might be a good reason or a cautionary tale. While I'm fascinated by this, the whole paranormal world, don't get too caught up in it. I know that's what John Keel, he really got caught up in it, and he was in a web of all kinds of strange things happening in his life. And he tells people, don't get involved in this. But I don't know. For better or worse, I think I'm going to take my chances because I'm still fascinated.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Do you think the government's made its deal with the devil? Do you think back in the time of Roosevelt and Truman? Do you think that either they or the military industrial complex made a deal with these aliens to trade technology for something else?
Talking about Majestic 12?
Yeah.
Probably not. I think the government probably has exotic technology. Right now, I lean slightly in favor of the claim that they probably have a craft. I came to that conclusion very reluctantly, especially if it's an occult phenomenon. Obviously, if there's a real craft, and I'm saying that there probably is, although I don't think the evidence is there to say definitively. That would lean more extraterrestrial, I think, in nature. So, but I think that that's out there. I think we probably have tried to reverse engineer it, and I'm guessing we just haven't got too far with it, despite all the claims that are out there to the contrary, that we've had alien reproduction vehicles for 20 years. I'm not willing to go down that path just yet.
See, I think I'm of a mind similar to you. I tend to think that I want to give humanity more credit than what we're giving it, and that a lot of what we have today is of our own invention, that we didn't necessarily pull from down technology. Although a lot of people would say, well, we got what we got from down crap from Roswell. That's the one place we haven't gone yet that I promised we'd go down. Why do we, if some of these are multi-dimensional or extra-dimensional creatures, why do we have physical craft from things like Roswell and maybe even MO41 and other downed craft? Why do we have physical pieces from alien crashes?
Yeah, that's a great question, and if that exists, and I believe it does. That's the best evidence, I think, for an extra-dimensional hypothesis, or at least an extra-dimensional one that doesn't necessarily involve what I call the spiritual or occult world. So I think that definitely leans in favor of more of a physical hypothesis. I do kind of towards the end try to bridge these two phenomena, the spiritual and the physical. I think it can be done. I've always thought, just to kind of give you a counterexample, let's say Michael the Archangel appears in a vision, or he appears in our world and he walks around with his sword. I would always assume once he disappears, he takes that sword back with him. But what if he could have left his sword? And what if we could have taken it into a lab and studied it? We always assume, or at least I would have assumed before, that couldn't be done, but why not? Maybe once you come into this world, you have to take on a makeup. You have to take on the elements of this universe. Maybe that's the bargain.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a bad thought. Something has to materialize here in order for you to use it, right? I mean, you have to be able to adapt to the world in order to work in the world.
Yes.
I get what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess in order for them to come into this dimension, they have to adapt to this dimension in order to operate in it. And that brings up the idea of why they could operate within their ship, but then the minute they get outside their ship, they pass away.
Right.
Because,
the whole biologics, that's another thing. You don't think of, talk about demons and angels. You don't think of these things that could pass away in our world or leave corpses. And I don't know about the bodies in Roswell. I know that's been claimed. Phil Corso claimed that, and among others. I don't know that the evidence is there that I'm convinced that was part of Roswell, although I do believe a ship probably crashed, something very exotic. But James Fox in Virginia, Brazil, that's really good evidence that biologics have been recovered. I think that's actually pretty solid. So, well, yeah, I'll have to admit that's an argument. If I'm being honest, goes more in favor of an extraterrestrial hypothesis, and they have some other things that go in that favor too. I think it makes more sense for extraterrestrials to have incursions at nuclear sites. Why would demons and angels do that? You could make some arguments, the physical, they land, they leave depressions in the earth and so forth. The extraterrestrial hypothesis, I kind of say it's a 60-40 phenomenon. I don't think it's dead at all.
I had Paul Blake Smith on last week. Your stablemate over at Llewellyn Books, which, by the way, this book is put out by Llewellyn Books as well, The Metaphysics of UFOs. And he had an interesting bit of a tidbit that goes back to MO41, or the UFO before Roswell. And that was this. And to me, the light kind of goes on when you bring up this tidbit. And that is that UFO that landed at Cape Girardeau or crash landed at Cape Girardeau. I forget the name of the scientist that worked with Einstein, but basically he's the one who came up with the ignition system of both atomic bombs. And when they asked him, how did you complete the atomic bomb so quickly? He just pointed up and said, we got it from them.
I didn't know that. Are you talking about Oppenheimer?
Not Oppenheimer. I'm trying to remember the, you know what? I have it. I have the book around here somewhere, but the name of the scientist who worked alongside Einstein, who also worked with Oppenheimer on the bomb. But he said, how did you complete that so quickly? He said, we use technology.
No, I was not aware of that. That's very interesting.
And that it came directly from Cape Girardeau, from that particular crash.
Wow.
The one that we weren't supposed to know about.
Right.
Now, did it or didn't it? I mean, it could be, it couldn't be. But it's something to think about,
Sure.
But that would be an interesting case of, did you actually bring something into this world that you weren't supposed to, and we abused it? And he said, because of the fact that we abused that technology, that maybe that's the reason why these creatures are, and I'll use the word creatures, or these aliens, whatever you want to call them, keep coming to our and babysitting us as far as our use of nuclear technology, because they don't want us to use it again. We're abusing their technology, the technology that we stole. So they're pretty much sitting on us and going, don't do that.
Well, that seems to make sense when you look at Big Sur and Malmstrom and the Russian case, where they actually essentially either deactivated a flight of nuclear weapons, or in Russia's case, they actually activated one temporarily that happened to be pointing at the United States.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I know Corso, in his book, he says that a lot of different technologies like bulletproof vests, lasers, a number of others were obtained from the Roswell crash. John Alexander, in his book on UFOs, he says that all of these technologies, though, didn't show giant leaps, that there's nothing in their history that would suggest that anything exotic was used to. Now, I don't know. I'm going from what he says on that. I don't know if that's true or not. He claimed that he talked to Colonel Corso, and Corso actually admitted that he made there were a number of factual inaccuracies in that book, and he intended to write another one to correct them, but unfortunately passed away of a heart attack in the meantime. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's certainly interesting to think about. I think Alexander had a good question. If we've not only got these craft, but we've able to reverse engineer them, why do we still have climate change? Why are we still using military jets instead of alien reproduction vehicles? Why are we using what would be inferior vehicles?
Right.
I think that's still a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, they have been, and that's the other thing too. They have been working on anti-gravity, and they've been working on other things behind the scenes, but they can't seem to nail it down. Right. I mean, right. They've been working on other propulsion systems, but they can't seem to get the gist of it.
And here's something that really, I think, kind of makes you think whenever you talk about crash retrievals. So these aliens, they come down here, and their craft obviously is by leaps and bounds more superior to anything we had, especially back in the days of Roswell, back in 47.
Yep.
you would assume that they're tracking each other. If one crashed, there would be another one know about it. I think that would be a reasonable assumption.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that they didn't get there before the military and take up their own crash debris and save? If there were dead alien corpses, why didn't they, or dying ones, why didn't they save them? If this happened, they apparently want us to have this technology.
Either that,
for whatever reason, or they're indifferent to it. It's possible they just don't care. They think it's like us taking a Corvette and giving it to a bunch of chimpanzees. We know they're not going to be able to.
There's that too. Or Dr. Kendall, I'll argue this. Would you, if you went to a planet of warring monkeys, would you want to wade into that mess and try and fight them?
Probably if I had their technology, I wouldn't be afraid of them. I don't think. Yeah.
Just on odds, though, I don't know that you know. I mean, if I go to a planet of silverback gorillas, I don't know that I take the chance. Even if I've got 2 machine guns and a tank, I don't know that I'm going to try and take out an entire planet of silverback gorillas.
Yeah, that's not a bad point. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. And you could also argue, why is it that the Roswell crash happened? So they might say, well, maybe I just thought of this literally just now as we're talking about it. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they were worried that they'd crash too if they went to that area to try to retrieve it.
Yeah. So I mean, there's that danger as well. So there might be something about our atmosphere they can't tolerate, right? So
that seems to be the case with all these reports of biologics. If it's real. Why do they all? It might be they die because of fallout from the crash. That might be enough to explain it, but they don't seem to survive long. You look at even in Virginia, Brazil, the best case I think for biologics having been taken. You know, it was alive, and then shortly after it was dead.
Yeah, and then if you believe the reports from Cape Girardeau, they took the one alien body of the one that managed to survive for a short amount of time and then died. And then they string them up and they take pictures with them. I mean, that's kind of barbaric as it is. So I don't know that, you know, if I'm an alien watching from far out, well, they just kind of mocked my dead buddy over there. So I don't know that I want to go make friends. Right. So
maybe you're right at the end of the day.
Yeah. I don't know that I want to take a chance and go play nice with the Earthlings. So I don't know. There could be 1,000 reasons, but you know, when people say, how come the aliens haven't come and made nice with us? Well, it's not exactly like we made nice with them when they crashed a couple of times. It's just kind of my look at it.
That's very true.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, although there was the one pastor who tried to give aid or tried to be compassionate at Cape Girardeau from what the report was, but it didn't last long. It didn't last long when the other townsfolk showed up. So, but that's, I guess, neither here nor there. Name of the book is The Metaphysics of UFOs, Evidential Case Studies on UAPs, Paranormal Phenomena, and Spiritual Experiences. Dr. Kendall's holding it up right there. It's available by Llewellyn Books, and we have a link in the description of this program. So, folks, I want you to go out and get it. It's a wonderful book, and it gives you the complete spectrum of what's going on currently with not only UFOs, but Men in Black and other phenomena surrounding UFOs. Dr. Kendall, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. It was my pleasure.
Oh, pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me once again, Tim. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Folks, we're coming up on the weekend. Couple of things to remind you of. First, if you're listening to this program, not watching this program, I want you to check out the video either on YouTube at the original Darkness Radio or just go to darknessradioshow.com. The video lives right where the audio is. They both live together under the show subject. So just go to the show subject or title. You'll see both of them there under the same subject. So it's right there. The Darkness Radio Apple app is available not only in the Apple Store, but the update is available as well. Make sure you've got it updated and get everything Darkness Radio right there on the Apple app. 3, support the show, if you will, please. You can support it a couple different ways. One, you can get your Darkness Radio and True Crime Tuesday swag at darknessradioshow.com in the shop. Two, you can support us by giving us a good rating wherever you listen to us on that particular app, or on YouTube. You can rate and review us. Please give us a good rating. 5-star reviews are always welcomed and appreciated. Thank you very much. And finally, we're coming up on the weekend. And folks, although you're probably up at the cabin or you're at a vacation spot or doing whatever it is you do, remember, first of all, when the downloads come your way, make sure you listen to them on a timely basis or watch them on a timely basis. But two, if you're going to the cabin, make sure you take either a member of your, an elderly member or a disabled member of your community or family with you, because they like to vacation too, by the way. It's important to not forget our elderly and disabled members of our community and our family, especially this time of year. I know we like to go out and have fun on the weekends, but we want to be a light in someone's darkness this weekend. Please, let's not forget our elderly, our disabled, and our disabled vets this weekend as we go out and enjoy the weekend, all right? That'll do it for this week for Beer City Bruiser, who, by the way, happy birthday, Bruiser. I know it was your birthday this week. Happy birthday, buddy. We appreciate you and love you. For Beer City Bruiser, for Mally Fox, for Jessica Freeberg, for Travis Thorpe, I'm Tim Dennis. Thank you so much for continuing to listen and watch the best in paranormal programming. This is Darkness Radio.